Hello everyone, I've got a quick follow-up video from yesterday's news video where I talked about how it seems like 32-player lobbies might be the maximum for GTA 6 based on things that we saw in the recent court case filings and stuff like that. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts in the comments of, would you be disappointed with 32-player lobbies? Would you be okay with it? What about races, things like that? And I think it was very interesting to read what you all said, because I was coming at it from a streamer perspective. I didn't really think about the individual player perspective. For me, I like having big lobbies. I like having as many people as possible. I don't like having to, when we've finished a couple of races, split a lobby so other people can join. I'd rather just everybody, as many people as possible, can join to have some fun on streams and races and getting people in, as many people from the community in as possible. But obviously, that's not necessarily the case for everyone. And, certainly if you're in a small group of players, you might not want to be in a lobby of 100 people with the chaos that might cause, especially with griefing, which isn't something that I really considered. But, I hope there's better systems to combat griefing, to be honest, in GTA 6, and maybe not appearing on the map for everybody, only when you're in their vicinity, and not having an oppressor Mark III would be a good start, But it was interesting seeing the thoughts. Some people did like the idea of having bigger lobbies and putting the idea that, okay, well, we'll probably have 32-player lobbies on PS5 and then it'll go to 64-player lobbies on PS6. But it does make sense that, there are certain limitations. Even when we've had big lobbies on 5M with the servers that we have there, there's limitations when we get these big player counts with traffic syncing issues and all that kind of stuff. It only really works in a racing format where we, spawn cars and things like that. But even then, you can have big issues. And obviously, GTA Online and GTA 6's online offering as well isn't going to be on dedicated servers. It's going to be peer-to-peer like it's always been. So it's difficult to then have hundreds of people all connecting to each other in a peer-to-peer format. So I get why there was, it wasn't sort of a universal hatred of the idea that it's not 32 players in yesterday's video. And also I get why 32 might be sort of a limitation of what the consoles can do, what the game can handle in general. But my main concern with the idea that 32-player lobbies were going to be the maximum was more so that it would just feel so empty. You've got this, because I think even now with GTA 5 it can feel quite empty. Yes, a lot of people congregate in the city, but you go outside of the city and there's maybe 2 or 3 people there. Even in a 30-player lobby, the map as it is right now can feel like you're on your own and not very well populated. And if GTA 6's map is going to be a whole lot bigger, which it looks like it's going to be, 32 players isn't really going to be able to spread across the map very far. But then there was a few comments that mentioned it in yesterday's video, and Josh sent me some information about it as well. A patent that Rockstar filed a number of years ago, it was actually 2021, that they've been working on this for a number of years. The idea of seamless transitions across sessions. So it appears like the world is much more populated than what it actually is. So 32-player lobbies might be the limit for the sort of area that you're in, but then you go to another area and you seamlessly transition to another lobby of a maximum of 32 players. And it feels like you're just seeing people all over the place, but really you're going from one different pocket of people to another. So I've got the patent up, but we're going to take a look at it. Because it is quite interesting what they say in it. So here's the patent, and we're going to come back to the abstract in a second, but I wanted to quickly go to the background section because it gives basically the things that sort of we are also concerned about. How, games offer multiplayer, and the online multiplayer games can have large communities of players, and management of network technology to handle those large number of players can be quite challenging. It says, for example, in conventional MMOs, a single session is used to avoid conflicts or game inconsistencies that can exist across multiple sessions. But as the virtual space in the world becomes larger, more players have to occupy the space for the world to feel populated. And that can pose a problem in conventional MMOs because fidelity might decrease when there's a lot of players in the same area of the map, and the ability to have a lot of people in the same session means that concessions need to be made elsewhere in the game to handle all of that. And everybody in the server has to sync up with everybody else, and all the states, if a door is open halfway across the map, 100 people across the other part of the map need to know that that door is open. So the scale of it becomes difficult to manage. And I thought this was an interesting section here where it says, in other conventional approaches, players are divided into multiple sessions. And in order to limit the required level of computation and network traffic to feasible levels, the number of players that can participate in each session must be limited. This is especially the case when game information is exchanged directly between users without the central server, for example, peer-to-peer. And this is talking directly about, GTA 5, GTA 6, almost certainly, it's all peer-to-peer online stuff. You are connecting directly to all the players in a session. And, it says how in some cases consoles can only support a very limited, relatively small number of players. They give an example of 50 in a single session. But this can pose a problem when many players in the virtual world begin to congregate in the same virtual area of the map. And players in different sessions may not interact with players in a selected session despite being present in the same virtual area. Accordingly, the virtual world does not feel as large as it should be, and players may feel disconnected from certain aspects of the game. In other words, a lower maximum player count causes the virtual world to feel more empty than desired, and that was what immediately stuck out to me when I heard the idea that 32-player lobbies might be the maximum for GTA 5, especially on a massive map and a much bigger map than GTA 5, and GTA 6. It feels like, that would be not good for the game because it would just feel completely empty. But obviously it says how this is necessary in conventional systems, because if a player from each of these sessions was able to interact with other players from other sessions, one player may see the other player walk through a closed door. For example, this is because the door may be open in one of the sessions and closed in another session. In other words, the two sessions can have a conflicting state that conventional games can't resolve. And that's the idea of this whole patent that was filed is a system, and we'll go back to the abstract, for session management. And it allows for seamless merging and splitting of network sessions in a multiplayer network gaming environment. Seamless session management allows dynamic movement of players in a virtual world during gameplay without unnecessary loading and/or stalling. As the players in the virtual world move around, the management of active game sessions can be improved to affect a more realistic perceived population. And I'll leave a link to this patent down below in the description if you want to check it out. Obviously, you can read it through yourself. It goes into great detail. But the idea is basically that, as you move around the world, a trigger event will happen, either going to a location or going far enough away from people or something like that, that the game is triggered into determining whether you should split that session or you should leave one session and go into another session. And the whole system is based on resolving any conflicts. So if some part of the world map is a certain way in your current session, making sure that it's the same way in the session that you're about to move into, resolving all those conflicts, merging it seamlessly. It sounds pretty advanced, to be honest, and it will be interesting to see how this would work in GTA 6's multiplayer. I assume that this is what they're going for, because how can you do that just on the fly immediately? And also it does say specifically about how if there's, it would work for multiple people in close proximity. If you got multiple people in one car, for example, and you all travel to a certain area, you'll all transport to a different session. How, what is the limit for that? If you're all in a friend group, but you're in different parts of the map, how does that resolve? And then how close do you need to be to your group of people if you're going to travel to a new area for that session to resolve itself? There's a lot that, a lot of questions that would, or at least explanation that would need to be given for the user, I think, once this is published in GTA 6. But I think this does ultimately solve that problem and that concern that I had from yesterday's video about 32-player lobbies feeling empty in a massive game world. You might be in a 32-player lobby in Vice City, but if you move out of Vice City and go to the Leonida Keys, then you go into a new session and you might not see a bunch of the people who were in Vice City anymore, but you'll see a bunch of new people who are all in that same area. And again, it's another 32-player lobby max. I would imagine that if that is the number that they're shooting for with these sort of mini sessions around the map, then that's probably also going to be a limit for game modes like races, death matches, whatever other game modes that they have. 32 players is probably going to be the limit. And like I said yesterday, I can kind of see that, because if you get more than that, even in a race, it can get a bit chaotic. Even 30 players can be quite chaotic. But it was more so the fact that the world would feel quite dead with only 32 players in it. This is obviously a way to fix that. So it will be interesting to see. And this is obviously something that is probably there's something that they're working on. Obviously, these patents get filed and not used all the time, but it does sort of, it gives some credence to what was said in the court case from yesterday's video, and how that was such sensitive information that 32 players is part of this sort of this whole new system that they've got for session splitting and seamless transitions of sessions. So you could be in an online session and meet new people all the time throughout the entirety of Vice City's map, and the Leonida map in general, the whole sort of state, this massive map. You're seeing people all the time. It's just that you're seeing them in different sort of small sessions, and you never know that you've changed a session. So, you know, that makes me feel, honestly, it makes me feel a little bit better, if I'm honest, about the potential for the online of GTA 6 to not feel so dead. And certainly it's a massive step up, something like this, to GTA 5 system, where it's just a single session of 30 players and then you've got to jump into a new one. Again, there's a lot of questions to be answered about how it will actually work in the game, and, you know, keeping people together and how that will work. But obviously, you know, they've been working on this for now 4 years or something from the time that this patent was filed. So I imagine they're trying to iron it all out and make sure it works seamlessly and make sure that it works intuitively for the user as well. And especially when you're in a friend group, making sure you're all sticking together and stuff like that. There's probably systems in place that they're working on for that. But yeah, it was just a little follow-up I wanted to give on yesterday's video, because I was certainly concerned that 32-player lobbies would feel very much dead. And a lot of you guys, well, there was a few comments about this that they'd filed, and with Josh sending it to me as well after I read a bit more about it. And like I said, I'll link it below in the description. I'll link yesterday's video down below as well if you want to have a look at that. But you know, when you read more about it, look at the images, look at the way that they're planning to make it work, it does seem pretty interesting and pretty innovative, I think, as well, for how they're going to resolve those sessions and make it all work so seamlessly. So interesting. I'm interested to look at it, and it was good to have a bit of a discussion about this. And even though it was, you know, it's not official news or anything from Rockstar, I think the patent on its own that they filed and this talk of 32-player lobbies, it's definitely given a bit more insight into what will potentially be there for GTA 6's online multiplayer. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick follow-up from yesterday's video. Let me know your thoughts about it down below in the comments. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.